Every winter, Scott felt he was too old to live in the wilderness. He loved it there, but each year got harder. The cold pierced through him, even with warm clothes. He preferred sitting by a cozy fire, drinking something nice, rather than fishing in the icy lake. Still, he stocked up on supplies because fishing opportunities would soon be scarce. He had to endure his achy old bones, but soon, something amazing happened that made him glad he stayed. He had caught a few fish when he saw a wolf approaching the lake's edge. He was far enough away for Scott to enjoy looking at him without feeling nervous. The wolf was massive, but to Scott's trained eye, he seemed young. He just wanted a drink of water, but the lake's edges were frozen and he walked onto the ice to reach it. A more experienced wolf would have noticed the danger and avoided it, but this one did not. He figured out he had a problem only after the ice around him started giving way. The ice broke, and the wolf fell into the icy water. The ice floe created from the breaking ice began to float away, and that was the piece the wolf grabbed onto. His body was in shock, and he couldn't swim back to shore. He had been dunked in the water before desperately grabbing onto the sheet of ice. He hung onto the ice, but his head was low, and he kept getting dunked in the water every so often. He was freezing and drowning. Scott immediately dropped his fishing gear when he saw what had happened. He grabbed some tools and hurried towards the wolf. He knew the wolf wouldn't survive long in the icy water. No warm-blooded animal could endure it. Scott couldn't just swim to help. That would mean risking his own life. He needed a different plan. The ice floe was drifting deeper into the lake, too far for Scott to reach from the shore. He saw the wolf's fur starting to freeze from the water. Alone, the wolf would have no chance, but with Scott there, they had a shot, thanks to a new tool he had brought to try out. Recently, his son had given him a small spear gun for fishing. While they preferred Scott to live with them in the city, they supported his life in the wilderness as much as they could. Now, the spear gun came in handy. Scott aimed and shot the ice floe away from the wolf, trying to prevent it from struggling and hurting itself. But when the wolf didn't respond, Scott knew the situation was dire. The wolf was slipping into shock, its head barely above water. It couldn't keep itself up anymore. Scott's spear gun struck the ice and held fast, and he gripped the rope anchored to the spear. He worked to haul the ice closer to the shore, carefully managing the pull to avoid injuring the wolf if it snagged on something. Despite the cold, sweat beaded on Scott's neck. Time was running out to save this magnificent creature. The ice reached the shore, but just shy of reaching it fully due to a layer of ice obstructing its path. The wolf sat near the ice, seemingly too cold to move. Scott needed to approach cautiously, wary of the fragile ice beneath him. He secured the spear gun's extra rope around his waist and a nearby tree, then cautiously distributed his weight as he crawled across the ice. The cracking sounds heightened his anxiety, his heart racing with each step. He reached the wolf and worried that it would be scared and get aggressive. But the wolf just looked at him. In those moments, Scott thought that its eyes seemed to be begging for help. Scott was determined to try his best. He got closer and realized that the wolf's paws were frozen to the ice. He couldn't move even if he wanted to. Scott tied a piece of rope to the wolf. When his hands touched the water, it burned his skin. This poor animal had to be in agony. Then Scott used his utility knife, attached to his belt, to cut the ice around the wolf's paws. While still frozen to the ice, he was free from the ice floe. Scott pulled him out of the water. He couldn't carry him on the ice, so he crawled a few feet and then pulled the wolf to him. It took forever and was one of the scariest experiences in the old man's life, at least for now. But at last, they were on solid ground. The wolf was so cold. If he wasn't moaning softly and moving his eyes, Scott would have thought he was gone. He set him down and wrapped his jacket around the wolf. Then he rushed back to his fishing spot to grab his gear and his snowmobile. He drove back to the wolf and picked him up on the snowmobile. It wasn't easy to hold on to him while driving. He was very large and shivering. Luckily, Scott's cabin wasn't very far, and he could reach it in minutes. He left everything on the snowmobile and carried the wolf inside. He set the wolf down next to the fireplace and lit the fire he had already built. He knew he was going to be cold when he came in and was ready to warm up as quickly as possible. He just had no idea that he would have a wolf coming home with him. The warm fire quickly made Scott feel better, but he worried about the wolf's paws. He used warm, not boiling water to gently clean the ice off the wolf's feet. All the ice melted away, and his paws turned pink again. After that, Scott put an herbal ointment he made on the wolf's paws. He did everything he could to help them heal. If the wolf's paws were badly hurt, saving his life wouldn't matter. He might not survive. The wolf had stopped whimpering and was just looking at Scott. He lay still, and Scott kept a close watch. The old man didn't want to be bitten for helping, but the wolf seemed weak and scared, not aggressive. He still looked very tired. Scott decided the wolf needed food. Maybe it would help him get stronger. He went outside again and got his fishing gear. Bringing it inside along with his cooler of food, he took the big fish and put it near the wolf. At first, the wolf didn't seem interested, but then he caught the scent and started eating slowly. As he tasted the fish, he ate more eagerly. He sat up and finished the fish. After his ordeal, the wolf looked completely healthy. He had the most beautiful eyes Scott had ever seen, and now they looked more alive and less afraid. After dinner, the wolf curled up by the fire and Scott left the front door slightly open. He went to another room to keep his distance from the wild animal. By morning, the wolf was gone. Scott was glad things had gone well and the wolf had survived. A few days later, he would be even happier. When Scott went out to get more firewood from the shed, he saw a pack of wolves running in the distance. One young male stopped and looked at him. It was the wolf he had saved. He looked great and healthy. It was a big reward, but it wouldn't be the only one from the wolf. The old man had risked his life to save a drowning wolf. You won't believe how the wolf repaid him. Later in the spring, Scott's son and his family visited. They wanted Scott to live with them, but they also loved the forest. The boy enjoyed running around and exploring his grandfather's world. They drove around on the ATV, and one day, they saw something special. The wolf and his family sleeping under trees. The wolf Scott had saved looked up, saw the old man and his grandson, and howled at them. It was like he was saying hello. It was a great holiday for the boy, but it almost ended tragically. It was the last few days before the family would head back to the city, and they decided to all go fishing. They didn't head to the lake this time, but instead, they went to the river. It was surrounded by forest and really peaceful and pretty. Scott showed his grandson how to fish, and they were all super excited when he caught his first fish. The boy ran up and down the river, and Scott kept warning him not to go too far. His son and wife allowed the boy to play, but they didn't know the dangers of the forest as well as he did. One time, Scott had to go to the bathroom while they were by the river. When he came back, his grandson was far downstream, about half a mile away, pulling a fish out of the water. He turned to them with the fish, really excited about catching it. But then something really bad happened. Out of nowhere, a bear came out of the woods. It smelled the fish and saw the boy, who was no threat. The bear wanted the fish, and it could hurt the boy badly. The boy was scared, and the adults were too far to help. They shouted to get the bear's attention, but it barely noticed them. It focused on the food. The boy was smart and threw the fish away, but it was small. The bear grabbed it and ate it quickly, then looked back at the boy. The bear smelled fish on him, which could be bad. Scott had never been so scared. Would they have to watch their loved one get hurt? Scott ran toward them, hoping to distract the bear, even if it meant risking his life. But he was too far, and the distance didn't close fast enough. He feared he'd be too late. Suddenly, a familiar, big wolf came out of the forest. It ran toward the bear and the boy. The bear noticed the wolf and was surprised. The wolf stood between the boy and the bear, growling. The bear tried to move closer, but seeing the wolf wouldn't back down, it decided it wasn't worth fighting over food when there was plenty around. The bear turned and ran away. The wolf stayed alert until Scott got there and picked up the boy. Then the wolf turned and walked away. Scott had saved its life, and now it had saved his grandson's. They couldn't imagine what would have happened without the wolf's help. Scott thanked the wolf, which looked at them before running off, probably to rejoin its family. For years after that, even until Scott moved to live with his son's family, he often saw the wolf running in the forest. It reminded him how good deeds can come back to you and was an experience he'd always treasure. After all, it had saved his grandson's life.